at the top of organizations at the C level, they don't understand what they're up against. And they understand how to run the entire rest of their business, but they're missing, like their strategic brain is not connected to this one thing that is, I would say, the most existential threat to their organizations.
Hello, everyone. This is your host, Manoj Tandon. Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security, Security Confidential. I got to remind you, please hit the like and subscribe button if you like what you do or what we do. Even if you like what you do, hit the like and subscribe button. It helps us with the algorithms. We all work for them, and it allows us to bring this great content to you. But we have a great guest today. It is Mr. Chris Nyhuis. He is the founder and CEO of Vigilant. He has more than 30 years of experience in cybersecurity, so you could say he's been around the block quite a bit. He's worked a lot with executives and security leaders to strengthen their cyber resilience, improve their incident response, and prepare for emerging threats that are coming from AI. And he's also tackled the problem of nation-state actors, so we'll be eager to get his feedback on it. Welcome to the show, Chris. Really appreciate you being here.
Gosh, I'm so excited to be here. It's been something I've been looking forward to, and I'm happy to be here. Thank you so much.
You're more than welcome. The honor is all ours. So we got to start with your background. Give us a little bit of how the heck did you get into this business? And that 30 years is a long time running. So there's a story here.
I'm tired, my friend. I'm tired.
I get that.
Yeah.
What's the story?
I got into just technology in general. My dad brought home a Commodore 64.
That's an awesome machine, man.
It was awesome.
At one time it had more games than any other platform out there.
It did. It was amazing. It was amazing. My uncle had an Atari. I thought that was pretty phenomenal. And he would bring it to family get-togethers and we'd play. The Commodore was amazing to me because it really stimulated the creative side of my brain. My dad brought home with that. There were these magazines, if you remember, but you would have a program written out there that you'd have to line by line enter into the Commodore 64, and it was the most frustrating thing. Sometimes you'd have something wrong, you'd have to scroll through everything. But so it helped me to be creative, but also helped me to realize that technology had to be so detailed because it had to work, and it was phenomenal. So I learned to start coding there. We got a Tandy 1000, later on. We started going to BBSs and just meetups and, going through it.
Did you have the voice module with that, by the way?
We did not have the voice module, but that would have been freaking cool. Did you?
What about the dot matrix printer?
We did have a dot matrix printer, and we bought the plotter when we got the 386. And so we printed out the Columbia spaceship. Remember that? It was like the space shuttle. And, that was the big selling point for the plotters. They gave you that file and you could print it out. And it was amazing just to watch this thing come out of nothing. And that really got me into IT. Now, what was funny is I got to high school and I was like, what, I'm out of this technology thing. And I decided to go to college for paper science and engineering. I don't know what I was doing.
That's paper science and engineering.
Yeah. And 3 years in, decided it wasn't for me. Got back into MIS and got a tech job at a dial-up internet company doing tech support, which was an experience. And it made me learn patience in technology.
This wasn't CompuServe.
It was based out of here in Cincinnati. We competed with Amazon, or not with Amazon, with AWS and CompuServe and all those. And it was just so I just got these just really cool moments in time that just taught me different things about tech in general. And it just really stimulated what I do now. And, I got into from there, just found my way to an organization that was, they were switching. It was a trucking company, food warehouse company that had ammonia control systems. And we were putting the first firewalls in that just hit the market. We were switching from hubs to switches, and it was just an interesting time. But the thing that was really the impetus of change for me was we started seeing people attack our network, and this was before the cyber industry was really a thing. We're all IT operations people and doing all the things, and it hit me of why they would want to attack our network. And the thing is that we had SCADA control systems, we had IoT systems, we had these valves that you could turn that were hooked up to a Windows 95 machine that would turn by clicking a
Wow.
button on the screen, and it would release ammonia into the air. And if you know a little bit about ammonia, just small parts per
It's
million
super toxic.
melts your lungs from the inside out,
Yeah.
and you're coughing blood up in seconds. And it hit me, and I went, wait a second. At the time, all these these viruses were just opening up people's CD-ROM drives and closing them, or taking over a keyboard, and they're more nuisances. That was when I went, there's evil people that don't like what we're doing, and I'll say they probably think we're evil, right? It's all ideology, but at the end of the day, there was someone that wanted to get in this network bad enough that they would have the end goal of releasing ammonia and killing people. And that's when I realized this is an industry I want to be in, because I want to really go against that evil.
Wow. So this, back in Windows 90, was the interface to the IoT systems through Windows 95, or was it actually? It was.
Well, there was an application that ran it, and then that application would turn little servos if you click on it, and it could open and close valves, or take sensors for temperature, because ammonia, if you compress it, it gets cold really fast. And so a lot of our food distribution channels still, they use ammonia in these systems still, because it's a great compression and refrigerant. They're a lot more secure today than they were back then. But it's a supply chain concern, especially for our food supply. Like, you take down one of those warehouses, you shut down east-west traffic of food that's preserved across the United States.
Yeah, I completely understand that. And ammonia is used even today extensively in the warehousing of large produce, large stocks of it.
Yeah.
Wow, it's amazing that back then because back then knowledge of these systems was not that common.
Right.
Someone had to figure out that you not only did you need to know Windows 95, you needed to know the underlying control system that was in place.
Right.
And then they had to find you. So somebody had to actively case out your company. That's just, and that required real work, because back then
it's real work. Oh, it's not easy. No, I mean, the internet wasn't what it is today. I mean, we still were getting MSDN discs, which, for those of you that don't know what that is, used to, instead of having help websites that you could go to, or chat rooms, we would order these books of just discs that you would have to go search through to find information around how to fix a problem. So it was pretty early on. But that's the thing, is that I think in the United States, and just I would say not just in the US, but in countries where you have a certain ideology around human life and the sanctity of it. When we look at our adversaries, we see them through our own eyes. And there's a psychological thing around this. If you think everyone's a liar, chances are you might actually be a liar, right? Because you see other people through the morality or the view you see yourself. And one of the things we run into here in the United States is that, like I said, in just similar-minded countries, we look at our adversaries through our own eyes, right? We think they want to follow the Geneva contract, contract. We think, or compact. We think that they're going to give us our keys back if we pay them if there's a ransom. We think that they're not going to do something like release ammonia and melt people's lungs they've never met before. And we think that they're not going to do the effort or the work to figure out how to do that. Now, what I think was happening back then was more positioning. I think that our adversaries have been positioning themselves in the United States, in our companies, in our small businesses, our medium-sized businesses, our enterprise, in our control systems, our power light. I think they've been doing that for decades. Actually, I know they have. And I think back then what we were seeing was they had already been doing it. They had already been tracking that down, right? And I would even say this, that we don't do ourselves a favor either, because for promotional materials in the cyber industry, and even back then IT, we release all of these all this stuff, right? Like, we release the ammonia control system issue, or the ammonia systems. We release the handbooks and the manuals for these systems. We make it easy for our adversaries to just open up a manual and see exactly what they have to do, right? But we have the psychological problem where we think, well, we wouldn't do that, so they wouldn't either, and that's not true.
Well, the thing would be, someone has to be motivated beyond money, Chris, is what I'm thinking.
Yeah, 100%.
That's my gut reaction.
Yeah.
Because if it's just money, there's better ways to ransom people. If you're actually getting into the evil of causing damage to life
Mm.
and property,
Mm.
your motivation's a little more than cash. You're not looking
Yeah.
for the money.
Right. And I think I would say this, most ransomware, I would say there's two camps of ransomware. There's ransomware that's just about money, right? But the other camp is about getting money to fund terrorism and the war effort that adversaries have against us. And I would also contend from our experience that a lot of the ransomware attacks that we see, they aren't over with the ransom. A lot of times these attackers are actually embedding themselves in multiple different systems within an organization very quietly to get a backdoor, and they wait and they're very patient. So I think in a lot of cases, when we see ransomware in banks or critical systems or infrastructure, those are diversion tactics. It's a diversion to get someone to think, oh, the incident's over. We don't need to keep looking. It's a diversion to make money, but it's a diversion to create an implant that allows an attacker to be there for longer. Because to your point, I don't think that their end goal was just to get money. It's really to have the ability to shut down our infrastructure whenever. I mean, look at the Colonial Pipeline, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think that was either a test or it was embedding. And I would actually say they're probably still embedded right now. I'm just guessing. I don't know. I didn't work that incident. But if I match it up to what we see in other incidents we work, especially in critical infrastructure, more than likely that they've either embedded or they just tried to learn about things and what they could do later.
So, Chris, why is it technically so difficult to find that persistence?
Yeah, so this is a mistake by the cyber industry. And
Okay.
And so what's happened, are you familiar with the OSI model?
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So a lot of people aren't.
But tell our
Yeah.
listeners about it
Yeah,
because
Yeah. So the OSI model is basically, it's a model that was put together years ago and it was because at the time what was happening is you had all these companies, you had Apple, you had HP, you had Compaq, you had, before they merged, you had IBM. They were all racing to create the system of all systems, right? But what was happening is it's killing innovation because they were creating these very proprietary systems, from, the keyboard to software to operating system and everything else. You had Microsoft coming out, you had, Apple was bringing out their OS, and everyone realized that if we continued to be proprietary and not work together, then we would never actually innovate in this industry and take it where it needed to be because no one company could really solve this whole problem. So what they did was they said, okay, let's create these 7 layers, and between those layers, inside of them, the manufacturer can do anything they want, do whatever you want, patents things, proprietary, whatever, it doesn't matter. But if you go from the network layer to, the data link layer, which, go look at these layers, but there's 7 of them, you would have to have a standardized connection of data transfer between those of what was called encapsulation. So every time data or anything went from layer to layer, it was encapsulated in the packet from that layer. And then on the other side, someone could take those apart and could now read that data. And it created this massive innovation growth because now companies could be proprietary all they wanted to, and everybody could put them together. And that's why, when we started building computers when we were younger, we could take one network card from one manufacturer and another one and put them in and put the drivers, and we were good. We didn't have to just put a network card in an HP system. And so it was really awesome. Now, what happened, inside of that is every one of those layers allows for some type of data to be manipulated or interacted with. There's consumed. So like IP addresses happen at the network layer, where MAC addresses happen at the data link layer, for instance. So what's happened in the cyber industry is, one, this adversity to the OSI layer came out. If you search OSI layer on the internet today in chat rooms, see a lot of people are going, oh, this doesn't matter anymore. This is ridiculous. It's stupid. Why do we even need to learn this? What's interesting about the OSI layer is, humans are at the top and the physical network cables are at the bottom, right? And all the stuff happens between. So what the cyber industry has done is they've moved their data collection up layers through things like virtualization, VDOMs on firewalls. They've moved data collection up to, end user logs, things like that. And the higher you go up the layers, the harder it is to find a threat actor. The lower you go,
Sure.
the easier it is to find a threat actor. But here's the adverse reason why they did it. If the higher you go, the less expensive it is for you to do.
Sure.
The easier it is for you to deploy. You don't have to be deploying physical equipment. But the lower you go, you need more physical equipment. It's more expensive, things like that. So as private equity firms, now Vigilant is privately held. We decided early on we wanted to make sure that cyber stayed a standard of care industry. That's the company I founded, right? So standard of care, we never took private equity. We never took outside investment because at the time my peers were doing that and they were going, oh my gosh, they're removing the ability for us to do what we need to do. And that's what happened is because the higher you go, the more margin you get and it just doesn't play there. So, and private equity is not the enemy of cyber. It's the decision-making that people have around what's important to find threats. So to wrap all that up, because security went up layer, attackers were able to go down layer and they can operate there in a way that is undetectable. And it was a big deal before last year. It's an even bigger deal now because as now AI is being used to attack, guess where that efforts are being primarily carried out? Lower level, right? And so now we have this perfect storm where you have advanced attack technology and very limited detection technology. And even if you put AI towards the problem, you're still only feeding it with like the top 2-3 layers of data.
At what level does the kernel of the operating system sit?
So the kernel is actually just more of an at the endpoint level, right? So which enters in the next big problem is that the cyber industry not only went up stack, but they moved everything to logs and endpoint telemetry.
Correct.
Yeah.
Please keep going. I think I know where this is headed. I want to hear you.
Right. So if you've seen the news, which I'm sure you have over the last like 6 months, actually over the last year, and there's a major, like the first time it was used was I think a month and a half ago, maybe. Well, first time in the news. But basically, what you can do with endpoint is you can decouple the process, embed your attack, and then put it back on, and the endpoint manufacturer won't know.
That's when the first virus was created.
Yeah, right.
That's how that was done. You're using machine language code,
right? Exactly.
To modify the header,
exactly,
of the file, and you're telling it to point to a
right. It hasn't changed.
That has not changed.
Hasn't changed. I was in the Denver airport.
But that's going to bypass every single control pretty much.
I mean, it totally does. That's why I'm saying you have to so I'll tell you a quick story of, I was in the Denver airport, sat down. I talked to people. My friends are like, dude, he's talking to someone again. So talked to this guy. And we were talking about his past and I found out that he was this older gentleman, worked at Los Alamos, back in his early career. And he was kind of down on himself. I'm like, dude, why are you down on this stuff? He goes, well, everything we worked on is obsolete. And I was like, whoa, no, it is not. Like everything you worked on is just smaller. And I said, the unfortunate problem is no one understands those foundational things anymore because we've stacked all this stuff on top of it and they're not even taught about it. And so I was like, man, you are a treasure trove of information because everything you studied and you learned and you built still exists today. It's just smaller. And that's the big thing. You said a lot of your audience is younger. Please study the past because these types of things just keep coming back around again. And like you said, it's machine code. It was back in the day. It still exists as an attack vector. And all the attacker has to do is get to that level, which is not hard. And then now they can use your endpoint technology to make you a robot of theirs. They can use it to control you. They can make it seem like an attack is on one side of the network when it's really not. They can minimize the information you get about the attack. They can manipulate your AI systems. If you're sending that telemetry to an endpoint technology that's learning, and any log off a system, and I'll say I've been in cyber for a long time. Every incident I've ever worked, the logs were always manipulated every time. And so we have to, as an industry, stop putting our faith in things that are controllable by an attacker, as our single source of truth.
To me, in many ways, that's a somewhat of a hollowed out process approach, right?
Yeah,
I mean, you got an actively running process.
Yeah, right.
I'm get to the machine level code. I'm going to intercept that process. I'm going to inject my own code into it and tell it to point to another piece of code I want it to run before it runs its piece of code.
Right.
I mean, that trick is as old as time. That was like...
Right. Still used today. And because AI is involved now as an attack point. Now, I'm a big believer that AI as defense, if that's your only way, and if a company's trying to sell you that it's amazing, it's awesome, big lie. Because AI as an offense has what's called time to learn, time to plan, time to carry out, time to test. When you take an AI system that has had time and they carry out that attack, and you have an AI system that takes time to learn, it will get beat by the AI system that has time all the time. And it doesn't matter what you do. Now, the issue that has made that problem even larger is most of the telemetry we get from our environments or the networks is from the laptop or the desktop or from a server that's running endpoint or some sort of log collection technology, which, like you said, it's as old as time, but you can inject whatever you want into that stream and go undetected. And it's been happening in the news. Like, we've seen that played out multiple times this year. It's been crazy.
But Chris, the level of, first of all, I can tell you recent computer science grads, most of them probably don't know what machine language is.
No, they don't, because
right?
they're not being taught.
No, not unless they're in the chip design business or, there's a reason to be writing fundamental controllers at that level. That would point to that there's a technical sophistication here. Is this now the domain of nation states that are really focusing on this, that are doing this, and not your backyard kid that's, you know what, I think I'm going to have some fun? Yeah,
I'll say it's not quite the backyard kid yet. However, they have the opportunity to learn very quickly. But you remember back in the day when you could, I forget who did it, brought it out first, but basically the design your own malware, you can go and click a bunch of check boxes and hit submit. It would compile the code for you based on your selection. And then you can go carry out your attack. That was, I think, maybe 10 years ago. That lowered the bar that someone needed as an attacker to get the tools they needed to attack. Now, in 2020, and this is from, I would say this is not mainstream. This is something that we observed at Vigilant, just in terms of, or I would say our hypothesis of an outcome, if you look at scientific, but we started seeing behaviors change right around 2020. And what it looked like is this: you had this proliferation of advanced skill set happening a lot more often and a lot wider than you had before. And in 2020, what we started to see is that you had a lot of people with a lot of time on their hands, and you had nation state actors that basically said, hey, we will give you technology, said hackers, right? Medium level, non-nation state, we'll give you technology, we will train you, we'll teach you, but we want you to be available when we need you. And we also want you to give us some of the money that you make, right? And when you saw that in 2020, you also saw this big increase in advanced attacks, and you saw this increase in skill set. Now, I'll say most attacks that get access to a company's environment is social engineering and through email. That's most of it, right? It's easy. It's not hard. You can get in. Once you're in, though, that's where you see the advanced skill set come out, because now they have to be low and slow because they want persistence, right? Because you want that connection later on, right? And one thing that I'll say that has been a interesting thing to watch is when we started Vigilant 16 years ago, the average time to detect a threat from the time an attacker started doing something, so we call this dwell time, to when they were actually detected was 90 days.
Right. And that number has gone down to hours and minutes right now.
287 days is what it is now. 287 days.
A lot of the insurance statistics that I've seen is that you can have ransomware deployed and up and running inside of 90 minutes, and speed has been king. But
yes, you can. But here's the thing. It goes back to us misunderstanding the objective of the attacker. The objective of the attacker is not ransomware. It's persistence. That's why we're seeing now, ransomware attack and happened. Major eye care company last year got hit ransomware. They got hit the year before by ransomware. Same group. Why? Because they stuck around. And so in the insurance industry, we run in, we assume something's ransomware, right? They attribute it to a threat actor somewhere, and then they say it's all cleaned up and they move on. What the attacker's doing in a lot of those cases, because we come in after some of these insurance agency incident responses take place, is we find that they actually were using that as a diversion because they wanted to have time to get persistence. And when the ransomware attack took place, it was actually months after they had already been there because they had been working on that. And the ransomware attack took place as the final diversion. And when you look at these, just the attackers in general, the 287 days, it isn't that all of a sudden it's 287th day the cybersecurity detection systems are detecting. It's because the actor revealed themselves in most of those cases. So cyber is not getting better at detecting. They're actually getting worse at detecting. Now, it's easier to get into an organization now for a few reasons. One, because most companies have moved full stack detection out of their company completely. They've moved just to endpoint telemetry because also what happened in 2020 is everybody went to work from home, right? And companies now have a much wider threat footprint that they don't know how to handle, right? And then you started getting things like SD-WAN and companies like that, but they're still not doing the detection it takes to actually find these threats, and that's why it's getting worse. But the number you're saying you're hearing, that you're talking about, where it's they get in, run in 90 minutes, and the detection happens. That's the 287th day. When a lot of these incident responders come in and they say, well, it happened a week and a half ago, it's because there's no forensic data to go farther than that. Most of the times it's been deleted by the actor because they covered their footprints. So, it's a big problem of data. Now at Vigilant, like I said, before, we've done things a little bit different, and this is not to tout up our company. You can come reach out to our team if you want to do that, but your listeners, but we've been able to get that to 4 hours from 287 days. But you have to do security in the right places. You have to get the right data, and you have to do validation of it continuously to find that threat. And forensics are the key.
So what's the approach then?
Well, first is, security can't be a one size fits all. There has to be it has to be a continuous loop of decision making, right? So first of all, you need to, most people do, their edge security off of logs on a firewall, right? Well, look at what's happened in the last couple of years. Every single major firewall manufacturer has been breached, right? Their software has, not the company, but the software.
Right.
So it's a supply chain attack. You have, and that started with, who was it years ago? I can't remember the name of the firewall manufacturer, but they had their supply chain. Someone actually broke into their supply chain or for their development, and they embedded malware into their firmware, and that got distributed all over the world, including to NSA. I mean, the U.S. government was using them. What's the name of that company? I can't remember.
That was
it's a purple
huge,
box.
I just drew a blank.
Me too. That's still happening. Like those things still happen, or there's vulnerabilities in your firewall just because all code has vulnerabilities. The thing we have to realize is, I'll say, are the nation states that attack us get this, but you have to have something that's passive in front of your firewalls that can't be attacked. If your detection system has an IP address, it's going to get attacked, and you can't defend something that can get attacked. So, a standard rule of warfare is whoever has the most visibility or the high ground will win most of the time. And so the problem is in the cyber war, we have visibility that's highly manipulatable by our enemy, and we have no visibility on them, right? And so that's the biggest thing. I mean, that's one of the first things I would say is organizations have to realize that the very device that you've put most of your, trust in is a compromisable system. And if you don't believe me, just look at the news. It's pretty clear.
So, Chris, there's another aspect to this, though. When you look at a lot of the cyber attacks, there's a huge percentage that are the result of human error as well.
Right. But that's
how will these systems prevent? You can't really idiot-proof, quote unquote.
You can. Yeah. And I would say this. I would actually not. I would say this. Anytime you take, well, I'll say it a different way. I think as businesses, we put too much responsibility on our team members. And what I mean by that is if you take a hacker and you put them in the room in an accounting contest with your CFO, I'm hoping your CFO wins, right? Because the hacker is not an accountant and they'll probably win every time in any test, right? But if you, even if you had the hacker take a few accounting test classes, just, closed book, no answers, just let's go. You take a hacker against a CFO, they're going to win every time or enough times to get in, and they only need to win once, right? So it doesn't matter how much you train your team members. I think that's good because it raises awareness, but their primary job, what keeps them employed every day, is being good at being their role. And that's going to be the first thing on their brain.
You're eliminating the low. It's like locking your doors. It's good hygiene.
Yeah, but yes. And I'm not saying don't train, but I'm saying do not train and then hold your team liable or fire them or create a scenario
where we would agree with you wholeheartedly.
Right. Yeah. Because at the end of the day, people get attacked all the time with social engineering, and these hackers have psychologists that study your team even before they attack. And I mean, they look at their LinkedIns, they look at their travel schedules. I think out of office is one of the worst things you could have on at your company in terms of footprinting and things like that. If you want to talk about that, we can. But it's this idea that they study your team members before they come in. And what I would say is, there are the ability to defend against these things well and to make yourself not an acceptable target by a threat actor, even with human error of mistakes, is out there. It's just organizations are not willing to do what it takes to actually execute on those things. And that's because there's limited budgets. Cybersecurity is more expensive than it should be right now, just because of the way that the market's gone. And just I would say also that you have at the top of organizations at the C level, they don't understand what they're up against, and they understand how to run the entire rest of their business, but they're missing, like, their strategic brain is not connected to this one thing that is, I would say, the most existential threat to their organizations. And it's a disconnect. So
if you're a small, medium business and not an enterprise, what would your advice be to them? How do they design an effective cybersecurity program then? What should they be doing?
Yeah. So the first thing is I would find, if you're a small company, I would absolutely seek out a cyber organization, right? That someone that's focused is just on cyber. And I would make sure that cyber company is either, if they're a reseller of that technology, that they're deeply connected to the manufacturer, the software developer, because, cyber changes all the time, and you have to have the ability to manipulate the technology very quickly to defend well. So I would make sure that if you're working with an MSP, I would make sure that they are tightly connected to, the manufacturer, the software developer, and that you've been able to prove that. Otherwise, you have an MSP that's using technology that, is, if you look at software development life cycles at most cyber companies, 12 to 18 months old. Right. And so you have to make sure that it can change more often. Or you work with the cyber company directly, right? And that, they're the actual makers and manufacturer of those things. But I would say this is a good litmus test for you with cyber is you ask them, will they guarantee, right, the outcome, right? Will they guarantee that if you get breached, will they cover your forensic costs? Like, do they have some skin in the game? If they don't have skin in the game, don't work with them, because they will not have your best interest in mind. I believe every cyber company should have skin in the game if they're providing service. It's the same thing as, and that's why I said earlier, I think cyber has become a margin in a hyper growth industry. It hasn't stayed a standard of care industry, which is what it was at its inception. And because of that, the outcome of care is not the focus, right? It's how much revenue can we get by selling units? And I think that's a problem. So you have to evaluate the companies you're working with better. And so that's where I would say small, medium size. But that's true for enterprise as well. Like you have to understand, is there skin in the game with the companies I'm working with? Because I will tell you this, most of them don't have skin in the game.
Yeah, that you eliminated almost the entire market.
Right. Which should tell you something. Like that should tell you something, right? They're allowed to be wrong 100% of the time with no culpability in your relationship when they're literally the person standing in the gap for you. That should be concerning. The second thing I would say is your cyber company or whoever you're working with should understand your business and your business objectives. Because, think about it, if you're going from point A to point B, you're going to get attacked to get there by competitors, in the United States, which is illegal, but or by competitors outside the United States, especially in countries that there's no oversight to. You're going to get, if you're in critical infrastructure, you're going, like Stryker earlier this year, you're going to be a target when we go to war because you provide Stryker provides battlefield coverage for heart telemetry and data when a soldier gets hurt, right? So, you're going to be pulled into this no matter what you want because you're here in the United States and you're part of whatever the US does. But the thing from a C-level standpoint is make sure there's a skin in the game. The second is make sure you're having conversations with your cyber company around what your objectives are, not just from a cyber standpoint, but how you're growing. If you're going to buy a company, make sure they know, right? If you're going to do some strategic thing this year, make sure they know because they can know how to defend you. And the third one, and I would say is probably the first place to start is as a C-level. I would sit with your frontline people for at least a week if you can. And you might think it might be a waste of your time, but it's not. Because what I want you to do is I want you to sit with your frontline people and I want you to learn the life cycle of triaging an alert. Because I want you to understand that on the front end before you ever get attacked. Because I guarantee you, if you have an incident, you will meet your frontline people. And so much will be happening and it will be so chaotic that unless you understand how to triage an event and what they're going to have to go through, you will not be able to make decisions. And I will tell you this, that I've sat in the room with boards and CEOs that against our I would say wisdom in doing this, they chose the wrong path because they weren't experienced in what was going to take place. And it actually shut their companies down. And so you have to at least understand the core of triaging an alert. Sorry for that tirade. That is just that diatribe. That's my. I see companies go out of business all the time, and they don't have to. Not our customers, but people that come to us to get help.
But what is the approach to find persistence?
See, the approach to find persistence. So persistence hides in encryption, right? It hides in entropy. It hides in not automatic. A lot of detection systems will look for a ping here and every 5 minutes. They build just a chaos into their connections. The ability to find persistence means you have to get data that you can trust where it came from, right? You have to be able to trust the source. You have to trust that it hasn't been manipulated. And you have to be able to compare that against data that possibly could be manipulated. And then it gets easy because you just diff it. And if your trusted data set says one thing and your other data set doesn't match, that's where your anomaly is. Just go there, right? So, but the problem is it's big data. You have to process it. You have to know how, and it's a small, medium-sized business isn't going to know how to do that. An enterprise could, but they're going to have to invest a lot into that technology and develop a lot of things on their own. So I think at the enterprise, you got to partner more co-managed with an external provider, where unfortunately I see a trend right now where not defending anyone, but I call it the celebrity CISO. You got CISOs that are out there that are trying to make a name for themselves, and they're getting rid of their service providers. They're hiring all these security people in, and they're trying to build their own programs. And you should build your programs on legacy. You shouldn't just wipe stuff out and go. And you're seeing a lot of companies are getting breaches because you're literally, moving, you're making all this change while the plane's still flying.
Well, that's
So
a story as old as time too.
yeah,
Empire
right.
building
It
has
is.
always been a tradition
So
in the
yeah,
enterprise.
it is. But it's what unfortunately what happens is you got that 207-day rule. The life cycle of lifespan of a CISO at a company right now is what, 18 months. So a decision one CISO makes is going to get inherited by the other CISO. They're going to be held responsible for it, and they're going to have that on their. So if you're a CISO, I wouldn't move jobs right now, but because you'd inherit something you can't detect. It's a crazy thing. So
That's fantastic. I tell you, this has been very enlightening. And we haven't even gotten through a fraction of these questions that we had thought we would get for you. But we do want to also make sure that we hear a little bit about Vigilant and give you a chance to talk a little bit about and plug anything that you want to plug too in the last several minutes here. So, Chris, tell us a little bit about the company and what it is that you guys do.
thanks, Manish. I am so proud of our organization. We started Vigilant, like I said earlier. We decided to be a legacy business, and so we put some stakes in the ground at the beginning. And this is the thing I would say is the companies you work with, you have to understand, like, what are they motivated by, right? And this is not just cyber; it's everything. If you're going to partner with them, and I would say I love our story because at the beginning we said, look, we're not here to build this company up and sell it. So we actually made a not for sale policy. We've had tons and tons of investors come along our way, and we've told them all no, because we want to build an organization that is able to be, and we have, built an organization that is able to be in control of its own destiny, but also the standard of care for our clients. And we have an amazing retention rate over the years. We have clients who've been with us since the very beginning, which is unheard of in this industry. We've created a partnership with our clients. Now, what do we do? What do we sell? So we created at the very beginning a technology that sits with inside companies' environments. And it creates what we call forensically validated detection response, which means we're able to, from the very beginning of collection all the way through to analysis, forensically validate that data hasn't changed. It's true. It's exactly what it's supposed to be. It hasn't been manipulated. Over the years, that's made us be forced to solve big data problems when it comes to cyber. And I would say the right data problems. It's made us have to find out ways to make long-term data accessible instantaneously, and then put that in front of humans to make decisions. We've integrated AI along the way. We've integrated other technologies. But the thing that's been the core is this forensic validation, because it ties into everything out there. And we can receive 155 different data sets right now. Any new unique data set that someone might have takes us 2 hours to onboard. And we traditionally would bring that into as an application and I would say, earlier, not much information at the data level to the client, because we brought it in as a SOC as a service, right? Now the market's changed, where you have a lot of companies. Now you have a lot of people coming out of school with cyber degrees. They want to get in the fight. And so over the last few years, we've converted all of our technology and our client interfaces and our access to data. We've taken all the tools we built for ourselves, and we have now made that available to the market to use. And we can come in to those environments. Either the client can self-manage themselves, or we can bring in our team as an overwatch layer. Now, over the last 16 years, we've been able to do that in such a way that's reduced the detection time from that 90 to 297 days down to 4 hours. We're able to, stop threats before they do real damage. We guarantee to our clients, if they have our Overwatch, that we provide unlimited incident response for you, which means your forensic costs go away. Insurance companies love that, because the largest cost in an incident is the incident response. We do that for free if a client would ever to be breached. And so, that's, so our approach to cyber is that this is a team effort. And, we have to be able to quickly, like I said earlier, you have to be able to change your technology rapidly. We can do that same day, depending on what a threat's doing. So you can pivot and be more effective. Like I said earlier, the industry is like, I think, 12 to 18 months on a software development lifecycle right now. That's too long. And, and so, we stay privately held. We can take private equity money, and that's helped us be a lot stronger as a company. and we protect organizations across DoD, healthcare, manufacturing, IoT, OT, automotive. Whatever industry, we protect. I mean, I would think we're almost in every single industry that's out there. And that's another thing I would say is change is, 18 years ago, 16 years ago, companies wanted, focus on industry. Well, the thing is that they all use Windows, they all use Mac, they all use the same firewalls, they all use all these same things. Data's data now, and a lot of times they all use the same cloud platform. So really learning how to defend all of these, especially because supply chain's involved, is really key, and we've been able to do that. So, our team helps people understand things way before. Now, another thing I'll tell you, I'm really proud about our team is, we didn't have these investors. And so we're like, well, where do we put this money that would normally go to an investor? And as a founder, I get to make those decisions. And my wife and I early on said, we want to take that money and we put that right into orphan care around the world because we wanted to come alongside these organizations that were doing real orphan care and support them with our time, our money. We've done things from, helping kids get through school to providing full holistic care. We developed way before it was even a thing. We worked with Rochester Institute of Technology to develop a 3D imposable thumb mechanical arm that was driven by shoulder movement for a boy named Raj in India. And he wanted to be an engineer, so we got him connected to Hyderabad University, and he, learned, did that. We worked in Nigeria. We work in down with organizations down in Mexico and here in the United States. I've gotten to watch kids grow from 11 to now graduating from high school in Nigeria. I was just there last year, and it's just been, it's made everything we do, right, matter just even that much more. Because with cyber, we're keeping companies in business, we're keeping people's hopes and dreams alive. That in of itself is enough to keep you going. But we have to do this right because there's a lot of kids out there that depend on us to support them, right?
That and then is now, very cool.
So that's what we do. And then the last 2 years, we started doing anti-human trafficking. So, when you're involved in orphan care, you start to see that it's a funnel, a lot of cases for human trafficking. So we've taken our tech and things like that and funneled it into organizations. And I'll say there's a lot of amazing people that have done things way more than we ever have in the anti-human trafficking world. And we're new to it. We're learning and we're trying to help them come alongside and develop technology and fund things and just even come boots on the ground. But it's a crazy problem. And I'll say cyber is at the core of it. And it's a pretty scary road when you go down it.
That is a great place to end this conversation, Chris, but we look forward to having you back at some point.
I would love it. It was a great conversation. I really enjoyed your questions and you have some pretty cool insight into a lot of this. And I'm excited for future conversations because,
I'm looking forward to it. Looking forward to it as will our audience. But if someone wants to get a hold of you, how do they find you?
LinkedIn's great. You can hit me up on Twitter as well. Just look for Chris Nyhuis. There's two of us out there. One lives actually there's three. One lives in Michigan, one lives in Australia, and one lives here in the US and in Ohio. But look me up. I respond, on LinkedIn. I respond it takes me a few days. Twitter, I'm pretty fast on, but yeah, hit me up there. You can also go out to our website, vigilantdefense.com. We're in the US, so we spell that with an S. Not a C, but go to our research tab. There's some cool stuff that we put out there just on breaches. There's this really interesting one we've been tracking on supply chain attacks that started right around March. So,
very good. Thank you, Chris. And we'll try and put some of those links in the show notes as well. And it's been a pleasure to have you here and look forward to having you back at some point.
Thanks so much. It was great.
Take care.
Thanks.